Good afternoon. I would like to introduce Jeannette Fondness. Jeannette is a math teacher and instructional coach in West Shore at New Cumberland Middle School. I have New Cumberland. It's New Cumberland Middle School. You were working on your doctorate on adverse childhood experiences, and a piece of what you do is on mindfulness, and that's what you're going to be talking to us today about.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah. It's
okay.
all you, Jeannette. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm going to share my screen with you. Hopefully this works out well.
Yep.
And can you see what I'm sharing?
No.
Let me try that.
There you go. Perfect. Yep.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about what mindfulness is and why teachers should be the ones to teach mindful practices. And I'm going to talk about what schools can do and where we start. And then I have a whole bunch of resources that I've collected and that I'll share with Amy, and she'll put on the PAECT website that you guys can access later. There's a lot of good information that I think will be helpful for you. So first thing is the definition of mindfulness. It's there's two definitions that are out there: a quality of state of consciousness or being aware of something, but more what we're talking about with mindfulness, and we talk about it in the classroom, is a mental state achieved by focusing on one's awareness on the present moment. If you think about the students that we have today, their attention is collected by so many other outside information. Like for instance, they might be, I teach middle school, they're very connected to their cell phones and they're not allowed to have them in class, but as soon as, they are allowed, it's always a constant, disruption. Also the fact that, they have a lot of things to tune in their attention to, but this is focusing on the present moment, the here and the now, while calmly acknowledging and accepting feelings and thoughts and bodily sensations used. And it's also used as a therapeutic technique. So I do have a little video that I'd like to share with you here. And just to let you know, there's a man, his name is Jon Kabat-Zinn. He is probably one of the biggest founders of what this is and how we should use it. And he talks about the importance of what mindfulness is and how we should use it. So I'm going to jump up here just a little bit because I know where I want to start.
My name is Jon Kabat-Zinn. Sometimes I tell the story that I was walking down the hall at MIT in 1965, fairly depressed about the Vietnam War, and I was a graduate student in molecular biology, just started in 1964, and I saw a poster on the wall advertising a talk that was called The Three Pillars of Zen. And I didn't know what Zen was, and I didn't know that it was Philip Kapleau giving the talk. I didn't know who he was, and it was Houston Smith who had invited him from the Philosophy and Religion department at MIT. I didn't know who he was either, but I went to that talk, and there were all of 5 people out of the entire MIT community who went to that talk. I was 21 or 22 years old at the time, and it just took the top off my head. And I recognized that I'd actually been looking for some unifying factor of my whole life to bring the domains of science and art together into the art of conscious living, you might say. And when I heard him speak about Zen and the Dharma as it is taught and practiced within that tradition, it's just like a light bulb went off, and I said, okay, this is it. And I started sitting at that moment, and I've never stopped. My advice to a beginning meditator is to bring awareness to what the impulse is that's bringing you to meditation in the first place. And therein lies everything you need to know. Keep paying attention to that, love it, and see what happens. And to love it, you have to actually nurture it. It's not a like flash in the pan, one shot, okay, I get it. But an ongoing love affair with life itself. And keep it simple.
Okay. So he is one of the I would say the most known people about mindfulness. So a lot of mindfulness is actually rooted in religion. So whether you're talking the Buddhist religion or even just regular prayer or meditation, that's where it comes from. And then John Kabat-Zinn is also known. He has a lot of information. He works with Harvard Health and does a lot of implementing of mindfulness into helping people recover from lots of things. It could be trauma. It could also be post-traumatic stress, those types of things, and just being more engaged in the world. So there's some benefits to mindfulness that I'm sharing here with you. I know that some of you teach with elementary students very young, but it's emotional regulation. I know a lot of times students have a hard time just being aware of what their body is doing. It also can decrease reactivity and increase response flexibility, which means you're developing the skill of self-observation.
I heard her call Aaron, and I was like, what?
And then also the brain can more quickly recover after being provoked. So when there's a time of, for instance, a child being out of control or agitated, they can actually put things back together more quickly and get more re-engaged in class. And also talking about the amygdala, which is part of the brain. The activity is decreased, which helps to limit anxiety. And I know in middle school, we have huge numbers of students that are struggling with anxiety. One of the most current numbers that I've read about is 1 in 8 students struggle with anxiety in the middle school. And this is one of those things to help with anxiety. There's also some interpersonal benefits where you start understanding others' feelings and emotions, and intrapersonal benefits about things within yourself. And also, again, talking about the brain and the neuroplasticity that is in the brain and how it helps to create new connections for students. And for the therapist, it also helps to, talk about empathy, compassion, and counseling skills, and lots of other things that could help tremendously in all areas. So the question often becomes, why do teachers need to be the one that have to teach these practices? Well, for one thing, students already have probably a trusted connection with those teachers. And that's really important that that connection already exists, because there has to be a trust already existing there. I do a lot of work with the impact of childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences. And those are things that happen to children from birth to age 18 that can actually impact them for the rest of their lives. I also have a link on my web on this video later that you'll be able to see and actually read more about that as well. I talked a little bit about the anxiety that we have with students. And I know I have many friends who teach in younger grades that say the anxiety of younger students is even greater. Also talking about coping skills, there's self-regulation. And I know that we have more inclusionary practices here. So we have students in our classrooms who in prior years would have been in a more restrictive environment. And those students are now being put into our classrooms. So to help with that self-regulation. Anytime you're working with the brain and teaching a new skill, that's helping them as well. And I'm a big proponent of creating resiliency with our students. And I think it's one of those things that will help them to overcome stressors that they have. And a school should be a place of learning. And for some students, it's a place of escape. So, school is a great place for them to learn about mindfulness. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask as we're going through this. This is what I was telling you about. I have links for all of these with benefits for all of them. So those are the same things that I talked about. So you can also download this PowerPoint, and then you can actually go into each of these and then talk about it talks about the importance of all of those. So we're going to talk a little bit about some mindfulness techniques that you can have and that you can work with the students. So very first thing to do, and I think a lot would have to depend on whether you teach early elementary or older students. I know that my middle school students do better sitting in their chairs versus sitting on the floor, but probably elementary students would probably do just fine being more quiet, because of course they wouldn't like fall off the chair or something like that, because we know that they do that sometimes. But sit quietly and just focus on their breathing. One of the great things to have is one of those expanding balls that you breathe with them, and as the ball expands, they're taking in air and then releasing and bringing it out. So the very first thing is to focus on their breathing. They want to breathe in through their nose and out through their mouths. And then you want them to start being aware of their body and what their body is doing. So for instance, from their head, maybe they have an itch on their head, they kind of maybe are recognizing that. And then they work their way from head to toe. Like maybe I'm thirsty and I can feel that. Maybe they can feel their hands, like if their hands are resting on their knees, they might be able to feel that sensation. But we're really trying to get them to recognize what their body is doing. And then once they get to just relax, and it's hard to believe that we're actually teaching kids to do this, the importance of it. But once they do that, even like with my students prior to taking a test, we talk about just taking a couple minutes to focus and relax, to kind of ease away the stress that they might be feeling. Also that they should start realizing all the senses that they have. For instance, the fact that they're relaxing, they might have sensations in their body, they might hear sounds, there might be smells, tastes, and sights. And one of the interesting things I like to do is I'll say to the kids like a 3, 2, 1. I want you to pay attention right now to 3 things you hear in the classroom. And it could be a variety of things. It could be the fan. It could be just a hum of something else. It could be, somebody sneezing or something like that. And then, 2 things that you can smell. And of course, in middle school, you have lots of wonderful smells that we have. And then like one thing is, like one thing that if you could taste anything, what do you taste? And a lot of times they'll like enjoy things that, that are rewarding to them. Like they might say candy or something sweet. And also to be aware of these emotions, they need to be present without any types of judgment. Now, there's some people that believe it takes 20 minutes to do a regular kind of mindfulness activity, but I think you can really do it in about 10 minutes. And I'm not sure if in your classroom that you have kind of like time after, like I always think in elementary school, I know I enjoyed that time when the kids first came back into the class from recess as like, I'll read a book to them, that kind of thing. But like one of the great things to do is to actually start working on mindfulness activities. It also brings down their heart rate and everything. And it calms them and it makes the teaching that comes after that much easier. But it doesn't, I think with even just 10 minutes, and sometimes in my classroom, we'll just do it for just a few minutes to get them where they need to go. Here are some things that are suggestions. I call it the Baker's Dozen for mindfulness because there's 13 things that I have here. And again, you can read through those, but one of the things just to do that I know even the younger kids like is just yawn and take a stretch every now and then. It's one of those brain breaks that are very good to do with the students. I know the second one I have here is hug someone. A lot of times it would be like a high five that works as well too. Or even just, to do something where they're more aware of their body. Also even stroking the top of their hands. Once you start reading about mindfulness, there's a lot of people that do tapping techniques. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but it's a way to focus their attention on something else. Even just mindful breathing for 1 minute where you're controlling the breaths in and out. 5-finger gratitude would be like 5 things that you're thankful for. Think of something that you're thankful for in school. Think of something that you're thankful for that you possess. A posture check, even just sitting up straight and, shoulders back. Practice loving kindness, kind of like do a body scan, almost like an x-ray of yourself, kind of where you are. And then also being mindful of your senses. Those are other things that you can do as well. There are many things that schools can do to really help. I'm not sure with our people that are attending today if they have time in their day, but if there's something you can do to allow for that time and allow for students to practice some mindfulness activities. like I said, one of the great things I think to help bring down heart rate in their, engaged mind is like anytime they have physical engagement, like for instance, when they come back from physical education class or maybe out at recess, that might be a great time to get them to practice some of these techniques. One of the things to also do is as you're reading a story to them, again, this is more in elementary school, but I will tell you this much, my middle school students love books being read to them as well, to kind of take some time and read a story to them and then just reflect on how a character felt and imagine themselves in that situation. And I'm not sure if any of you have heard about Habits of the Mind. It was something that came out in about 2008. It's by Arthur Costa and Benny Kulik. This is some of their books, and I have these on my resource pages. But these are great things to do as well. They've identified 14 things to work with students on. Like it's about being, I'll say, mindful of things that are happening in the world. For instance, they're looking at wonderment and awe, thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. I happen to teach math, so we have mathematical practices, and I can relate these really easy to them. It's also like persisting, thinking flexibly, managing their impulsivity, listening with understanding and empathy, questioning and posing problems, creative, imagining and innovative, and taking risks, thinking independently. And also one of the big ones is finding humor. I know in middle school, I think you have to be partially crazy to teach here, but I also love it because they appreciate my sense of humor, which is not always the greatest, but it's definitely in line with middle school students. I also have, I collected some research behind mindful practices. I had to be really careful with these because I wanted to pull things that you could actually access and that were at a public domain. I have a lot of access to other things, but there's limitations to what I can share. So these were things that I found that would be beneficial to you as well to help with students. How many have you ever heard of social emotional learning? Has that been anything? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. So social emotional learning is, I'm going to say it's a newer thing that's coming around. It's about things that we have to work with students to, the comments are like soft skills, and I don't like the word soft skills. I like the word necessity, things that they need to know. But social emotional learning talks, I put actually their wheel on my PowerPoint here. But about being self-aware, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And this is in classrooms, schools, and homes and school community. And I like the fact that if you look at the visual, it'll show that classrooms is where so much of this is taking place, because we all know that some of the students don't have the backgrounds or the support or even just the modeling in their home lives that they would have in the classroom. And I look at where we need to start. It actually starts with us, and we have to be mindful. How many of you actually do mindfulness strategies now? Ooh, very good. Nice job. I know that in my crazy world that I teach, I don't always take the time for me. And I know with what I do with adverse childhood experiences, one of the things we talk about is the importance of self-care, especially for teachers. And I think that mindfulness would be one of those easy ways that we could model for them why we do it, because I think they think we're like super women and supermen that can actually do anything and nothing stresses us. Like they actually don't realize sometimes that you actually don't live at school. So the fact that you need to look at showing them that you're human and that there are times that we're stressed, but I know that we all put our, outside world at the door when we walk in, and we can pretend that nothing's going on. But one of the most important things is we have to start with us, and we have to be knowledgeable about the practices and what they do for you. And we must not be afraid to try new things. We want to look at you know, maybe we start an activity and it works really well, or we do an activity that doesn't work really well. Just look at ways that you can refine that. And I think teachers are really good at finding things that they can share. And we have to be okay with, you know, when it doesn't work well. And I know many of us probably feel that way. I know I'm a perfectionist and I always want everything to work well the first time I do it. But I also know that that's not realistic. And we also do that with our students as well. I have oops, hi there. I stopped sharing my screen here for a second. So do I have any questions right now from anybody? No questions? Okay, I am going to share one other thing with you here. I was thinking that it would be great for us to look at one of the videos that I actually do have. If you look at when you unload or upload my extra things that I have available for you, one of the videos that I have is Andy Petticombe, and he's actually, it's kind of funny. He was a monk at one time, and kind of what he had done to help. Oops, I think I might have just. You guys all still there?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to reshare this. Just a second. Okay, I think mine's back to sharing, hopefully. Thanks. Here we go. We'll see how this works. Can you see that video?
Yeah.
Okay.
We live in an incredibly busy world. The pace of life is often frantic. Our minds are always busy and we're always doing something. So with that in mind, I'd like just to take a moment to think, when did you last take any time to do nothing? Just 10 minutes, undisturbed. And when I say nothing, I do mean nothing. So that's no emailing, texting, no internet, no TV, no chatting, no eating, no reading. Not sitting there reminiscing about the past or planning for the future. Simply doing nothing. I see a lot of very blank faces. My thinking is it's probably have to go a long way back. And this is an extraordinary thing, right? We're talking about our mind. The mind, our most valuable and precious resource through which we experience every single moment of our life. The mind that we rely upon to be happy, content, emotionally stable as individuals, and at the same time to be kind and thoughtful and considerate in our relationships with others. This is the same mind that we depend upon to be focused, creative, spontaneous, perform at our very best in everything that we do. And yet, we don't take any time out to look after it. In fact, we spend more time looking after our cars, our clothes, and our hair than okay, maybe not our hair, but you see where I'm going. The result, of course, is that we get stressed. You know, the mind whizzes away like a washing machine going round and round, lots of difficult, confusing emotions. And we don't really kind of know how to deal with that. And the sad fact is that we are so distracted that we're no longer present in the world in which we live. We miss out on the things that are most important to us. And the crazy thing is that everybody just assumes, well, that's the way life is, so we just kind of got to get on with it. That's really not how it has to be. So I was about 11 when I went along to my first meditation class. And trust me, I had all the stereotypes that you can imagine, the sitting cross-legged on the floor, the incense, the herbal tea, the vegetarians, the whole deal. But my mum was going and I was intrigued, so I went along with her. I'd also seen a few kung fu movies, and secretly I kind of thought I might be able to learn how to fly, but I was very young at the time, you know. Now, as I was there, you know, I guess like a lot of people, I assumed that it was just an aspirin for the mind. You get stressed, you do some meditation. I hadn't really thought that it could be sort of preventative in nature. So I was about sort of 20, when a number of things happened in my life in quite quick succession. Really serious things which just flipped my life upside down, and all of a sudden I was inundated with thoughts, inundated with difficult emotions that I didn't know how to cope with. Every time I sort of pushed one down, another one would just sort of pop back up again. It was a really very stressful time. I guess we all deal with stress in different ways. Some people will bury themselves in work, grateful for the distraction. Others will turn to their friends, their family, looking for support. Some people hit the bottle, start taking medication. My own way of dealing with it was to become a monk. So I quit my degree. I headed off to the Himalayas. I became a monk and I started studying meditation. People often ask me, what I learned from that time. Well, obviously it changed things. Let's face it, becoming a celibate monk is going to change a number of things. But it was more than that. It taught me, it gave me a greater appreciation and understanding for the present moment. By that, I mean not being lost in thought, not being distracted, not being overwhelmed by difficult emotions, but instead learning how to be in the here and now, how to be mindful, how to be present. I think the present moment is so underrated. It sounds so ordinary, and yet we spend so little time in the present moment that it's anything but ordinary. There was a research paper that came out of Harvard just recently that said on average our minds are lost in thought almost 47% of the time. 47%. At the same time, this sort of constant mind wandering is also a direct cause of unhappiness. Now, we're not here for that long anyway, but to spend almost half of our life lost in thought and potentially quite unhappy, I don't know, it kind of seems tragic, actually, especially when there's something we can do about it. When there's a positive, practical, achievable, scientifically proven technique which allows our mind to be more healthy, to be more mindful and less distracted. And the beauty of it is that even though it kind of need only take about 10 minutes a day, it impacts our entire life. But we need to know how to do it. We need an exercise, we need a framework to learn how to be more mindful. That's essentially what meditation is. It's familiarizing ourselves with the present moment. But we also need to know how to approach it in the right way to get the best from it. And that's what these are for, if you've been wondering. Because most people assume that meditation is all about sort of stopping thoughts, getting rid of emotions, somehow controlling the mind. But actually it's quite different from that. It's more about sort of stepping back, sort of seeing thought clearly, witnessing it coming and going, emotions coming and going without judgment, but with a relaxed, focused mind. So for example, right now, if I focus too much on the balls, then there's no way that I can relax and talk to you at the same time. Equally, if I relax too much talking to you, then there's no way I can focus on the balls. I'm going to drop them. Now in life and in meditation, there'll be times when the focus becomes a little bit too intense and life starts to feel a bit like this. It's a very uncomfortable way to live life when we get this tight and stressed. At other times, we might take our foot off the gas a little bit too much, and things just become a sort of bit like this. And of course, in meditation, we end up falling asleep. So we're looking for a balance of focused relaxation where we can allow thoughts to come and go without all the usual involvement. Now, what usually happens when we're learning to be mindful is that we get distracted by a thought. Let's say this is an anxious thought. So everything's going fine, and then we see the anxious thought, and it's like, oh, didn't realize I was worried about that. You go back to it, repeat it. Oh, I am worried. Oh, I really am worried. Wow, there's so much anxiety. And before we know it, right, we're anxious about feeling anxious. This is crazy. We do this all the time, even on an everyday kind of level. If you think about the last time, I don't know, you had a wobbly tooth. You know it's wobbly, and you know that it hurts. But what do you do every 20, 30 seconds? It does hurt. And we reinforce the storyline, right? And we just keep telling ourselves. And we do it all the time. And it's only in learning to watch the mind in this way that we can start to let go of those storylines and patterns of mind. But when you sit down and you watch the mind in this way, you might see many different patterns. You might find a mind that's really sort of restless and the whole time, don't be surprised if you feel a bit agitated in your body when you sit down to do nothing. It feels like that. You might find a mind that's very sort of dull and boring, and it's just almost mechanical. It just sort of seems it's as if you're just sort of getting up, going to work, eat, sleep, get up. Or it might just be that one little nagging thought that just goes round and round and round to your mind. Whatever it is, meditation offers the opportunity, the potential to step back and to get a different perspective, to see that things aren't always as they're here. You know, we can't change every little thing that happens to us in life, but we can change the way that we experience it. That's the potential of meditation, of mindfulness. You don't have to burn any incense, and you definitely don't have to sit on the floor. All you need to do is to take 10 minutes out a day, step back, to familiarize yourself with the present moment so that you get to experience a greater sense of focus, calm, and clarity in your life. Thank you very much.
Okay. I enjoy that. I mean, I can't juggle to save my life, but it's pretty impressive that he's able to do that. And what I want to talk about a little bit with you is the fact that I know like it always is like, well, what's good out there to help teachers? There's two books I'm really going to talk about. I'm going to read a little bit of both. This first one is Happy Teachers Change the World. It does talk about mindfulness. And there's a little part that I did want to read from here. This is in the foreword, and it talks about, this book draws on the ethics underlying the true mindfulness practice, offering us a guide on how to build happy, healthy, and a compassionate community within our classrooms, schools, and universities. So I think it's really important that we are building those communities in our schools, and I think this is one of those ways that really helps. It also allows for us to teach about empathy and also about just being aware of themselves. And there's also another part in this. This is Catherine Weir, which is one of the co-authors of this book, and she's talking about like how she got of mindfulness, compassion, and contemplative studies in her research and practice about 15 years ago. I have not been that privileged. I mean, I've been in the classroom for 28 years, but I haven't had that much time to work with this. But my own route to mindfulness was inspired by trying to cope with an episode of serious illness, which moved rapidly to the realization that mindfulness could transform my relationship with myself and with many, mostly self-inflicted challenges of my overstuffed life. And I think that's a problem that many of our kids have, right? That practice. And then it's gratifying to see this whole field from well-being to mindfulness is now becoming more mainstream in parts of the world at least. So that's one. Again, that's Happy Teachers Change the World. And another one is Cultivating Mindfulness in the Classroom. This also has some great things for us to look at. That's by Jeannie Iberlin. She talks about strategies that we can do. She talks about different types of breathing exercises that we can do, as well as ways that we can, the stress reduction that we can have with this. And it also talks about the importance of the positive self-concept, positive interactions, that emotional control, and those attention to what's happening in our lives. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is how teachers practice mindfulness and model mindfulness. What our worlds are like once we step out of our classrooms. I know my world is kind of chaotic at times, but it's one of those ways to make you more aware of what's happening in our world and what's happening in your world, especially because that's what you're focused on. And do we take the time to practice mindfulness, to take that time just to think about what's going on? I've done a lot of reading and research about a lot of work that actually our military is doing with the service personnel, and how before they're being deployed, they work with mindfulness strategies and teach them ways to learn to be more mindful, and that they have a better time assimilating back into, I'll say, regular life once they come back from deployment. Do we allow time to decompress, or are we going from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak? And mindfulness is really a form of self-care. It's things that we can do to help ourselves overcome things, but also modeling for our students of what they can do. And mindfulness promotes psychological functioning, as well as for individuals who have to practice that emotional regulation at work. I know we have a lot of emotional support students at our school, and I know this is one of the things that our teacher is beginning to work with the students on, just being more aware of what they're doing and how, you know, they can be more aware and kind of tracking those things that they can do. I have a little thank you and a connection here for me if you have to get a hold of me, but I do want to point these out. The first video that I have on this is by the one we just watched. Also, The Art of Stillness. And one of the great things to really use for mindfulness is using either art or like video photography. Schwartzberg, which is the very last one that I have on here, Nature, Beauty, and Gratitude. His pictures are absolutely amazing. And he on that link, it talks about how he used time-lapse photography and how that really helps us to find beauty in our world. And one of the things that it links easily to is The Habits of Mind that I was talking about by Arthur Costa and Bennett Kaluk. And then A Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit, that's by Brewer on this one. And it's talking about, it has many things about habits, good and bad. But one of the things he talks about is breaking the habit of technology with students and the reliance on that. So I think those would be good ones. And then why being still just a few minutes a day can actually help what moves most of us to find our true happiness. That would be another one that I would recommend. Some of these mindfulness resources, once you start searching about mindfulness, it's pretty much limitless. There's many things out there. There's some great free resources that are available. There are mindful practices that you can, mindful practices in the classroom. It's a PDF that you can easily download, and there are actual activities that you can use in your classroom to help teach mindfulness to your students. There's actually apps out there, like for instance, mindful music. There's a lot of studies with the type of music students should listen to. Of course, there's the old classical, but there's also some jazz music and different types of things that actually can help them as well. I also have the social emotional learning wheel that's on there, and their link. The social emotional learning is really looking at ways to help students who we're developing the whole student. So we're looking at the whole student, not just, like for instance, my class, not just their math needs and those sorts of things. And also, I would also recommend you look at the Center for Developing Child, which is out of Harvard. That would be another great research to use too. They do a lot of things out of Harvard with not just mindfulness, but trauma and the impact of trauma with students. And also UCLA has the Mindful Awareness Research Center. It's the last link that I have on this page, which talks about the importance of teaching mindfulness. And it's not just to children. It's one of those lifelong skills that we're working to teach kids and model with kids that they can take and use well beyond our classrooms and using them later in life. And again, here's a bunch of the references that I have that also I will share with you. One of the other ones I do want to point, Kenneth Ginsburg, and I'm not sure where many of you are located, but he's actually coming to Central Pennsylvania. He's a pediatrician out of Philadelphia, and he works about building resilience in children and teens, but he's going to be speaking at the Jewish Community Center in Harrisburg at the end of April. If you're nearby, I would definitely suggest you see him speak because he would be wonderful. So any questions or anything that you have that you'd like to ask? I see some names at the top. I'm guessing not really. Do you use mindful practices in your classrooms now? Do you use anything, breathing exercises or calming techniques?
Does anyone want to speak to that? Go ahead.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, okay. I wasn't sure if you're talking to me. I didn't hear the other person. I don't know how to introduce it to my kids. I am a daily meditator and yoga practitioner. I'm training to be certified in yoga.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you do yoga with your students?
It's been so precious to me, and I've been developing it so intensely these past couple months that I haven't really known how to incorporate it in yet, and I think I'm just hesitant because I don't want to turn them off of it if I introduce it wrong,
Well, I'm gonna say embrace that growth mindset and be like it. I look at it that anything that involves their body is a good thing for it. What age of students do you work with?
I teach 9th through 12th high
Okay.
school. Yeah.
Well, and even with that, I mean, you can do yoga in your chair, and
Yeah.
and there's plenty. I'm sure you're the expert with that. But even with that, you can. The whole process of breathing and just being aware of breathing, which I know yoga is a big part of as well, but just that practice to start with that. And I know that there's not that I'm all about selling anything that anybody's out there. You can get certifications through Mindfullness for many different websites. Of course, they're charging you to attend their things, but I think it's important that just we're teaching them skills that they have for their lifetime, just of calming, strategies. And the breathing, you go back to that. That's one of those original things that really helps with those.
Yeah. Do you ever talk to parents at all to say this is what I'm doing in my classroom and I find it valuable?
I probably do more through electronic communication, through like emails and things like that. We'll do like a class update, and it's here's what we're doing this week, and they know that the kids have worked with. The breathing is one of the big things I do because they're not always at a place where they can do some of the other things that we talk about. Yeah. But breathing is something that they can always do, and just that I'll say more of like a meditation time where they're just kind of disengaging and relaxing themselves. Like one of the things I teach algebra. So my kids are very stressed about the Keystone exam that eventually comes up, and they're already stressed about it, and it's not until May. But I'm always, saying to them, when you get this test, you just need to calm yourself and say, I have this. Just spend some time breathing and calming yourself down. And it's amazing how they say, I did those breathing practices right before I took my social studies test, and it was much easier. Yeah. So like that's one of those things that I think is really good for them, no matter the age. Now, of course, I have middle school, so it's a little different. And I think high school would be definitely more different than that.
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Keep going.
The difference in the ages is that middle schoolers, I'm sure, are pretty self-conscious. But I think in high school, it's almost, there is that self-consciousness that I worry about with the kids. Am I going to be the only one breathing, the way that she wants me to? Or is this something, silly? I don't know. I feel like there's so much of a stigma around mindfulness that I am a little trepidatious to start, I guess.
I think the biggest thing is a lot of parents, I'm going to say they connect it to like, well, you're teaching them to pray. And it's like, no, I'm not teaching them to pray. I'm teaching them to be aware of themselves and just calming themselves. Now, if some of them take that time to do something else, whether it's, a meditation technique or, possibly even, then that's fine. That's their choice. But it's also a skill I think that we have to teach them because they're not necessarily getting it modeled at home. And I know that some homes of where my students come from, they're far from calm, and that they need to figure out ways when they're in a very stressful situation of how to de-escalate themselves when things are out of control in their environment so that they can settle themselves and kind of regulate what's happening within them.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to have them be an observer instead of a participant a lot of the time.
Right. And I think they need to hear that from us, as well as, from their colleague, their peers in the class, but also with some of it, sometimes things do come up, if we talk about, oh, let's think about the past week. When were you mindful in the past week, or what kinds of things have you done? And sometimes a discussion will ensue that, I might have to do a little more paperwork than I intended on, but it also is good because that tells me that they have a high trust environment in my classroom, where they know that even though they're very afraid of what others feel about them, there's certain classes that have a much greater trust level than others. And that's a really nice thing to see. So I'm excited. I would love to know how the yoga thing would go, because I know that we have some teachers that are getting, I'll say, certified like you, and they're like, I'd like to teach yoga in my classroom. Like, I want to know how that goes. So I think that would be.
Yeah, I'll keep in contact. I think for me, it's like such a personal. I hate to say journey, but it's true. It's such a interesting progress from where you begin to now. I'm in my 7th month of the training. It's a 9-month long session.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it's a little bit extra than a 200-hour, even though I'm going to be certified as a 200-hour yoga teacher. But and I'm not even sure if I'm going to teach yoga. I really just did it so that I could develop a daily practice. But it's interesting how you are persistently progressing, if that makes any sense. Like, there's just it's really, really love that I've found, almost midway through my life, and I'm very excited for it. So I think like I'm at the point where it's almost too much information, and so
You become overwhelmed.
And I think that's really the crux of it at this point. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to introduce it on like its most essential level, which is definitely breathing, but also like I have such a joy and love for it that I want them to feel it instantaneously. And I guess I'm forgetting that it wasn't all, like I continue to struggle with certain aspects, and it's the work that's really the reward.
And I would relate that to all their learning. The fact that when you start something new, you're not, I relate everything to math because that's my world. But when you start something, you're overwhelmed by it, but then you gradually get a grasp of it and you feel more comfortable, and you can leave out some steps and those sorts of things. It's kind of like with mindfulness. I think you become overwhelmed with it initially, and that's why I said it's really important to grasp that growth mindset, that you're like, you know what, it might not work so well this first time, but here's what worked well. Here's what I can change. Here's what I can try. And, develop your own repertoire of things you do.
How do you structure your time?
Well, what makes it difficult is in middle school, we have 50 minutes in each class. So it goes by very quickly, but even that, one of the times that we almost always do mindfulness is before we do any assessment, where they just kind of calm themselves. But I find it more that with my class that I have immediately following lunch, we are definitely doing a mindful type of activity, because they come up from lunch very hyped up, I guess is the easiest thing to say, and it kind of settling them down to kind of re-engage them in the learning. But also when I see my students becoming, I'm going to say, not engaged, and their minds are drifting someplace else, just to kind of like a refocusing activity where, hey, let's just take a minute. Okay, pencils down. Let's do this. I want you to, put your hands. One of the big things we do is put your hands on your lap. And I don't have them sit on the floor because that would just be disastrous with middle school students. But, put your hands on your lap, and I want you to, feel the pressure of your bottom on the chair. I want you to feel the pressure of your hands on your lap. And I just want you to breathe with me. And those sorts of things. And one of the things we do is we turn the lights down, because that just does, help to, center them. And it's really nice. And then even though that might only be a 2 or 3 minute process, afterwards, they're definitely more engaged in what we were doing. So to me, I might have given up 2 or 3 minutes, but I just gained 10 minutes of focus from the benefit of doing that.
Yeah. I think that I'm going to do some small activities on a regular basis. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even just starting with it, that's all right. I put a sign on my classroom door, do not enter.
I'm at home. I just picked them up from school. So
That's all right.
my daughter.
Yeah. But, you know, that would be a great place to start, too, is just starting with your children, with the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing those sorts of mindful activities with them and say, oh, I tried this with my daughter last night and she really liked it. Let's see how you guys feel about it. And that would be a good point on a good, you know, a twist on your part. You know, my daughter, she must be about like 9. How old is she? About 9?
How old are you?
I'm 8.
She just
8. I was close. But, you know, see how, you know, my daughter liked this. Let's see how you guys like it. Or, you know, what can you think of? And one thing nice about teaching high schoolers is you could say to them, what did you like? Or do you have any suggestions of what we could change to make it more, you know, beneficial for you? So that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's hard to get to a teenager's, you know, perspective and level. And, you know, I mean, I'm with them all the time.
What subject area do you teach?
I actually teach, this is why I also find it a little bit difficult to teach mindfulness, because I teach 3-dimensional design. So I teach basically art, which is great. You know, and it's wonderful, but you need to go. Okay, I can't concentrate, please. Okay. All right. Thank you, honey. Okay, I'm finishing. Oh my God. Go. All right. But we have 40 minutes and I deal with a lot of messy materials. So in that time, there's like a cleanup, there's an instruction, there's a time where they work on their own personal projects. And then, you know, so there's a setup and a cleanup sandwiched in there. And it's a whirlwind. 40 minutes is not nearly enough time for a proper class.
What I would suggest for you, though, is actually use that mindfulness time to kind of prepare themselves for their mental checks of what they're going to do that day. Like, you know, imagine where you are right now. And like, I want you to think about, you know, what steps do you need to finish today to get to where you need to be closer, you know, and then reassess themselves at the end. You know, were you able to complete those tasks? That would be one of those good things to do. Yes. Sometimes we do what's called station rotations, where the kids go from one activity to another. And so, like, I'll use a little bit of time where I say, okay, you know, we're going to spend time in each of these. This is what I want you to do. I want you to think about what that's going to look like when you're working at that activity and what it should sound like. And it sounds ridiculous, but it works. And, you know, and one of those things that I will say is if they're getting off task or whatever, I'm like, are you, you know, where you visioned yourself to be? Are you being a productive member of that group working today? And it does help to re-engage them sometimes.
Yeah, and then there's that self-reflection that they have of how, like, being the outside observer. Yeah. What I do with my advanced kids is they have a 3-week process right now, and I give them at the beginning of the 3 weeks, I give them the requirements to the project, and then they do daily objectives. And I have to sign off on their calendar before they ever finish those. So after they write out their daily objective, I have to approve it. And we talk about, is this a doable objective? Is this, you know, specific enough and all of that? So I do think that I do it in that aspect, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have them finish a goal, and chunk it into small, doable things. But, you know, to allow them to focus, I can't figure out how to scale it into my time.
Even like maybe after you give them 10 minutes to start working, just have them stop and just, be very present in what they're doing and where are
Yeah.
your thoughts right now? What are your objectives? Like, what do you see yourself? Those types of things would be good practices to do with your students, especially in the area that you teach.
Yeah.
And I think that would work well for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
This was very valuable.
Thank you for the questions. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, I am going to stop the recording.